Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here to help strike what I hope will be a reasonable balance between an irrational attachment to the first imprint version we heard of something, the one that struck us like a bolt of lightning, ka-ching, and all the rest, and being completely wanton and wanting to hear everything and liking everything we hear because it's different from everything else we hear. Somewhere in the middle is probably the healthiest place to be. Now, this came up. We've talked about the imprint version before, and whether we stick to it like glue or whether we don't. But this came up because I've seen a bunch of comments lately with, well, I heard this version of work X and nothing else has ever been as good, or no one else will ever do better than so-and-so in that, or this is complete and utter nonsense. It's nonsense objectively, of course, because whatever version you think is the best ever that you've ever heard in the universe, someone else has another version that they think is the best ever, and it's the best thing they ever heard in the universe. So that's all just hoo-ha. But for me, and I just want to make this point, one of the reasons we do this, I have this channel, one of the reasons I hope you're watching is because of the joy of hearing multiple versions of the same works, and what's more, learning just how much greater they are than any single performance can hope to encompass. Let me give you an example of that, if you don't mind. The first version I ever heard of Mahler's Second Symphony was Leopold Stokowski's, which I think was released around 1974, somewhere around there. I read a review. I read a review in the New York Times. I was like 12, somewhere in there, and I ordered it at my local record store in downtown Milford, Connecticut, because there was no classical record store where I could hope to get it. Of course, I could go to New Haven and go to Cutler's or the Yale Co-op in those days. They were marvelous, but I couldn't drive yet. And so, this is why I would bicycle downtown and order things I wanted from the local shop. So I got it and I listened to it, and it blew me away. I mean, it blew me away like no other recording of anything ever had. It was my first Mahler symphony. I was hooked. At the end, I'll never forget, I usually listened to music in those days, in my bed, reading. I would read a book and I'd put the record on. I just listen to it and let it play. So it's the Stokowski Mahler 2, and we get to the very end, and the chorus is screaming and shrieking, and they go, Was du geschlagen, and the cymbals, bass drum go, pow! And I just sat bolt upright like I'd been struck by lightning. It was amazing. I'd never had a musical experience like that. And so, of course, I was immediately hooked on Mahler, sort of, and the Second Symphony. Not so much Mahler, because then I got the Third Symphony from the library, and it was Scholti's horrible one with the London Symphony. It sucks. But beyond that, Mahler's symphonies sound so different from one another, and it took me a long time before I understood the personal voice in each one. Initially, superficially, they all sounded like a different composer wrote them. Anyway, so I loved Mahler's Second Symphony, and I loved the Stokowski performance, and that was the one. Then I heard the Bernstein Sony recording and Bruno Walters, and I started listening to others because I just loved the work so much, and I wanted to hear what different people did to it. Well, turns out that the Stokowski performance was a Stokowski performance. In other words, he reorchestrated piles of it wholesale. You may have heard his live performance that was released by the BBC. It's quite different. It's much more faithful to Mahler's original text. On the recording, he does all kinds of odd things. Anyway, I heard very, very different things in those other performances. So that made it easy for me to want to know sort of what Mahler really wrote and what these different people were doing and why and all that stuff. And my affection for the Stokowski, which remains, I still have great affection for it as the one that got me going. But I don't think it's a great Mahler second anymore, and it's certainly not my favorite Mahler second by a long shot. It isn't. And I had such a thrilling time, this is the point, listening to all of those other performances. It was wonderful. Something similar happened to another favorite work of mine, Haydn's 88th Symphony. The first recording I ever heard was Fritz Reiner in Chicago. It's a very good big band classical performance by a of its type, of its era. But then I heard Bernstein do it. Then I heard Dorati do it. Then I heard Fischer do it. Then I heard Bruggen do it. And some of the period instrument people. Wow, Thomas Fay, pardon me, whatever. It was such a difference from one performance to the next. And I welcomed hearing all of them. Then a lot of them I heard sucked. I mean, you'll hear a lot of things that you don't like. But if I just said, okay, Stokowski, Mahler 2, Reiner Haydn 88, my musical life would be so much poorer because I just didn't keep an open mind about it, and I didn't value the different things I heard in these different performances, either details or the overall conception. And so I really ask that if you're totally wedded to a version that you imprinted on, you can stay wedded to it. That's okay. But keep an open mind and keep on listening. Listen to other versions of these things, because it's just part of the great joys of listening to great music, of learning and hearing about a great work of art. It's to revisit it and hear different things. Now, that's one aspect. The other aspect I want to talk to is the total relativism approach, which you also hear. This comments on this approach usually come up when I trash something. I trash something and say, oh my God, this sucks. And then someone says, well, I heard it, and it's really not that bad because, yes, everything you said about it is true, because I'm very careful about these things. I usually don't make claims that are not audibly true. But besides that, they say, but, oh, it has this that's different from that one, or this that's different from that one. Well, there's also taking that position too far, because every performance is different from every other performance. And if all you care about is the fact that every performance is different from every other performance, then okay, knock yourself out. I mean, just get every recording of everything and enjoy all the differences, because they're wonderful to the extent that they're different. My view is a little bit, more circumscribed. I just believe that part of our job is to understand whether those differences matter, whether they're meaningful, whether they're good choices, and to judge accordingly, because ultimately, the work itself, as it exists in this sort of, conceptual fog, which is a piece of music, because a piece of music is not the score, a piece of music is not any one performance, a piece of music is the potential realization of what is written there, or what people, have an opportunity to realize in their interpretation. So there's no way to define it in a concrete sense, but we get enough listening to a variety of performances of something to have a very good sense of what the piece of music is and what it wants. You're not going to play the opening movement of Beethoven's Fifth in adagio tempo just because you feel like it and get away with it and have everyone say, oh, it's wonderful because it's different. Or replace the piano part of a piano concerto with a bassoon, or play something. You get the picture, right? I don't have to go into it ad nauseum. I mean, the point is simply that, yes, everyone has a right to like what they want, right? I mean, if you're one of those people who imprints on something and never wants to hear another version, okay, fine, but don't leave a comment, because nobody cares. You've taken yourself out of the realm of civilized discussion of the work. And if you're one of those people who just likes every new version because it's different from every other new version and everything's okay, and everything's, again, we don't need to hear from you. We don't need to hear the comments, because it's not helpful. It's not a useful discussion about what the work is, what its potential is in performance, and which versions we feel best realize that potential. There are works that I just collect because I love them. One of them is Rachmaninoff's Symphonic Dances. I could hear every version of that ever made. I don't like them all, though. I don't recommend all of them. I mean, there are some that I think are much better than others, but I'm just interested in hearing them. And I get that. That's part of the joy of this, too. It really is. But maybe I say this because I'm a critic, but I think being able to judge, to develop our taste, to hone our listening experience to apply what we learn, our knowledge about a work, to each new performance as it comes, and to judge them accordingly is a wonderful activity. It's a fabulous activity. It's one I've sort of dedicated my life to, but you don't have to be totally dedicating your life to it to still have a firm view in mind of what a piece should be and what performances realize your conception, which, I hasten to add, is as valuable as anyone else's. The greatest genius in the world does not have a greater conception of a work than an experienced listener does. And I believe that. I believe that an experienced listener may have a better conception of a work than the composer did. Because all of us are limited. We're limited by our belief in what the possibilities are and our knowledge of what they are. Do you honestly think that Beethoven had any sense of what the possibilities were in his symphonies based on performances that we've heard over the past 50 years on recordings? 60 years, 70 years, 100 years of recordings? He had no idea. Mozart had no idea. Haydn had no idea. None of them knew what their music would become. And so we have to be really, really, really careful about maintaining that either only one version is correct or that all versions are equally correct. The idea is to be an informed listener and to make up your mind based on your accumulated experience of listening and in a positive sense, in a way that we always look forward to what's new, but we're not afraid to judge if it doesn't meet our standards, whatever those may be. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks so much for joining me. Take care.